Jorge left for his own tent that night, but Sam insisted I stay with her. This time I took her up on that offer. I hated to admit it, but after staring into the eyes of the Ka statue and going into a trance, the idea of being alone was unbearable. The feeling of Sam's body pressed against me was comforting, even if we spent the hours until daybreak tossing and turning. When sleep did find me, I was whisked back into the world of wet death, fighting strong currents, struggling to breathe. The nightmare never felt so real, not even in the days after the accident. Now, they were so lifelike when I woke, I could almost swear I tasted river water in my mouth. Each time I started awake, I listened to the faint breeze whistling through the valley. Sometimes it rose to a shrill wail, and I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the soft rise and fall of Sam's breathing. I doubt I slept more than a couple hours, until the dawn's light passed through the tent's thin walls, waking us up. After breakfast, Jorge insisted on going back to download the ROV files in the tomb alone. I stayed with Sam in the communications tent while she drafted an email to Ossendorf. Despite her injury, she was still the better typist between the two of us. The weak signal icon in the bottom corner of the screen didn't inspire much confidence for a rapid delivery, let alone timely response. But until another project officer was on site, this was our only option. Sam did her best stating the facts without the message bordering on unbelievable. "What do you think we saw last night?" I asked, breaking the silence.
"I'm really not sure, Derrick,"
Sam said, combing fingers through her red hair.
"I wasn't there, and surely there's some rational explanation for it. Even if that explanation is just James being something of a nutter."
Another moment passed in silence. Sam fussed over the email, making small edits while we waited for Jorge. "Do you think he'll help us? Ossendorf, I mean?"
"I should hope so. It's his duty as the expedition senior archaeologist. Although it is something of a bother he's known James all these years. He seems impartial enough, but I do worry he might be tempted to give an old colleague the benefit of the doubt."
Sam fidgeted before refreshing the email page.
"Even if he is willing to do something, we're in for a long wait for his response. I haven't seen any incoming messages since yesterday evening. Not even an update on that sandstorm."
I must have looked concerned because Sam followed up quickly.
"I suspect it might have fizzled out. It never was heading straight for us. If it were to change course, they would have sent us something, or at least called the sat phone."
"Do you think the satellite phone would have better reception during the day? Maybe we could just call headquarters and explain our situation. That'd be better than waiting for a slow email response."
"I thought of that last night. I've only used it that one time."
Sam paused, lifting her bandaged hand.
"There might be better reception during the daytime, but we'd have to steal the sat phone from Elaine or take her into our confidence."
Someone rushing by outside interrupted this train of thought. More followed. Several, in fact. Sam and I shared a look of confusion before opening the tent door. Members of the dig team were rushing toward the tomb or to the equipment storage behind the communications tent.
"What on earth?"
Sam began. I was about to stop someone and ask what was going on when I spotted Jorge hustling towards us against the flow of the crowd.
"Derrick, you gotta come back with me. James, he found another chamber. He says it's the mummy pit."
A meaningful glance passed between Sam and me as Jorge handed off the thumb drive.
"I'll be right along," she said, "just as soon as this email goes through."
I ran to the tomb with Jorge. The expanse between camp and the dig site was already crawling with other archaeologists. This time I wanted to be one of the first to witness the new discovery, especially when James was involved.
"It's a hole big enough to fall into, right in the middle of the floor,"
Jorge gasped between breaths. This and variants of it were all I had to go on as we thudded down the staircase into the noisy tomb. The passageway was once again blocked by a line of slowly advancing people ahead of us. When we finally made it to the chapel, a ring of archaeologists clustered in the center of the room, blocking our view. I had to elbow my way through to see James, kneeling on the floor with a crowbar. He was struggling to pry up a floor tile, revealing a dark shaft leading downward. "Some of you bleeding idiots, get over here and help me," he shouted. I was among the ones to help carry away the stone tile. Acrid, dry air, undisturbed for millennia, wafted into the chapel, encircling our ankles like a cool, invisible snake. Beneath was more or less what Jorge described, a hole, maybe 2 feet square, plunging into inky darkness. I should have been awed by this latest discovery, but instead my attention was drawn to a startling change in James. His normally neat clothes were smudged with dust and dirt. His hair hung disheveled over his brow. Even struggling under the weight of the tile, his movements were jittery, and he kept casting anxious glances back at the hole. His skin was ghastly pale, and the bags under his eyes made his fanatic expression all the more unsettling. It was hard to believe he was the same aloof, disinterested man from the pre-dig orientation in Cairo. I glanced mistrustfully at the serdab as we set the tile beneath it. There was no time to dwell on the Ka statue inside, as James barked orders at everyone in the chamber to make preparations to enter the mummy pit. The rest of the morning was a blur. An aluminum tripod was hastily assembled over the pit. The air in the chamber below tested safe to breathe, but flexible yellow ducting was lowered inside as a precaution. More cold, pungent air filled the chapel as fresh air circulated into the pit. A camera flashed as someone photographed the hole, along with an archaeological meter for scale. Something must have been wrong with the camera, because it kept messing with settings and taking the same picture over and over. It was mid-afternoon before everything was set up, and once again, James insisted he enter the chamber first, to ensure it was safe. As he descended into the shaft, armed only with a portable work light and a haversack, I couldn't help feeling envious. I was low in the pecking order, as the senior archaeologists argued amongst themselves who would be the next to enter the mummy pit. Some went as far as getting into climbing harnesses as they milled about the tripod, waiting for the all clear. About 45 minutes passed, and we still had no word from James, other than the occasional echoed reassurance he was alright. I saw no reason to waste my time waiting around, not with so many people lined up ahead of me. Excited as I was for my chance to go into the mummy pit, I was more preoccupied wondering why I hadn't heard anything back from Sam. It was late afternoon at this point, and I hadn't seen her since that morning. I don't think anyone noticed me slip out of the chapel and make my way back to camp. Emerging from the tomb, I couldn't believe how low the sun was over the valley walls. Occasional gusts of wind buffeted me as I walked back to camp. The dining tent door flapped lazily in the breeze, and a couple of dust devils skittered through the ring of tents. With everyone in the tomb, the place looked abandoned. Sam was at her post in the communications tent, fiddling with stacks of papers on the table, some with bold headings labeled Shipping Manifest, Excavation Report, or Artifact Inventory. "Any luck sending the email?" I asked, entering the communications tent.
"Not in the sense you mean, I'm afraid,"
Sam said, straightening stacks of paper before turning to face me.
"The video file wouldn't send it. I had to settle for a written account of what you saw. Now I'm worried Ossendorf and the rest of headquarters will think it's a lot of rubbish."
"What if we try again later tonight? Jorge said there's better reception at night."
"I suppose we could, but even that last message barely went through. Might ask Jorge to have a look at this thing. It's been acting up all day. I haven't received the usual updates from Expedition Headquarters, and not even the weather reports come through."
The silence was palpable. I began to consider other courses of action. None of the other archaeologists on the site had any authority, let alone James's standing with the Egyptological Society. I was trying to think which of the senior archaeologists might take a chance and help when Sam broke the silence.
"I'm afraid we might have another problem also."
"This just gets better and better," I said with a sigh.
"I've been searching through our records and I've found inconsistencies. I don't think this is some clerical error. I think James is using some of these artifacts in his rituals."
"Are you sure?"
"I'm almost certain. Between the initial inventory and the shipping manifest and what's left in the staging area, at least one scroll and 2 small jars of resin are unaccounted for."
I thought of James alone in the mummy pit and the haversack he'd taken with him. He'd been down there for a long time, even before I'd come to talk with Sam. Images of that creep from the night before flooded my mind, and I wondered what he was actually doing at the bottom of the pit. Before I could voice my concerns, I noticed a sound over the unusually breezy day outside. Sam must have heard it too, because she turned to the door and her expression became quizzical.
Is that the quad out there?
She meant the ATV. I frowned and went to check. Sure enough, a dust cloud was rising above the thicket of acacia trees south of camp. The engine grew louder, and I was surprised to see Felix emerge from the tree line into camp. It's Felix. I thought he wasn't due back for another week.
He isn't,
Sam said, rising to meet me by the door.
What on earth is he doing here?
He must have seen us because he changed course and headed straight for the communications tent. Sand and dust blew over us as he slid to a stop. He didn't bother killing the engine, he just shouted over it.
Where's James?
He's in the tomb inside the mummy pit. I expected the news of the new chamber to pique Felix's interest, but his response was something unexpected.
Bastard, I've been trying to reach him all morning. Have you ever been receiving our messages? That's just the thing, Sam said. I've been sat here all morning trying to get a hold of headquarters, and I haven't had any luck. The last incoming message was...
Felix waved his hand dismissively.
Start packing all the primary documents. If there are any partially filled artifact cases, seal them shut. We need to evacuate the camp.
Sam and I shared a look of surprise as Felix gunned the ATV's engine and shifted into gear. Why? I shouted over the engine.
Because of the sandstorm.
Felix yelled before racing toward the tomb, leaving us behind in a cloud of dust. Sam and I made quick work of securing the communications tent. So much so that the line of archaeologists pouring from the mouth of the tomb was still flowing back to camp when we were done. Hastily packed personal effects flew from flapping tent doors. Tents that demanded hours to set up collapsed into piles of nylon and fiberglass poles in minutes. There were disagreements and bickering as people got in each other's way. I think James would have stayed in the mummy pit the entire time, even if he thought the expedition was going to leave him behind. Yet, somehow Felix's demands for an explanation for the ignored satellite phone calls, coupled with the Egyptological Society's secondhand reprimands, eventually drew James from whatever had him transfixed inside the mummy pit. I wasn't there for the exchange, but I heard plenty of his arguing with Felix secondhand from others. I found consolation in this, knowing he probably had more scrutiny coming his way once we returned to Cairo. In the short time it had taken to break down camp, the occasional gusts blustering through the valley morphed into sustained winds. I frowned, looking across the windswept clearing at all the small groups packing last their things. Over 2 months in the field, and we're being torn away on the brink of uncovering the most interesting thing the tomb had to offer. To add insult to injury, James, the project officer who spent most of his time in his office in Cairo, while the rest of the team was on site, had been the only one to actually see the burial chamber. He hadn't taken a camera with him into the mummy pit, but from second-hand whisperings of his argument with Felix, the sarcophagus was down there. There was no time to press him for more details, but in all honesty, I was too bitter to ask. The old adage about shards of broken pottery being better teachers about the past than more sensational artifacts might be true, but it didn't make the mummy any less intriguing, and there was no comfort knowing the least deserving among us had been the only one to see it. The wind behind me was loud enough I didn't notice Felix approaching.
Sorry we had to cut this dig short, Derrick,
he said, offering a small smile. I won't hold it against you, I said, even if I was hoping to distinguish myself for my post-grad applications next year.
Don't sell yourself short. You put a lot of work into excavating that staircase. I don't think it went unnoticed. Let me know if you need a letter of recommendation.
I returned a smile, genuine this time, and wished there were more people like Felix in archaeology. I really appreciate it. Something tells me I won't be getting one from our project officer. Felix's face turned into something like a grimace.
I wouldn't take it personally. He's come under fire recently for...
Felix hesitated, as if not wanting to say too much.
Let's just say some peculiarities during his tenure with the Egyptological Society.
I might have more to say on that note after we get out of here. Felix nodded, a solemn look on his face. I turned to face the valley's northern cliffs. The usual brutal sun was muted by an overcast sky. Shadows shrouded the crevasses and chasms in the cliff faces. The stairway to the tomb was still visible, but I couldn't help but wonder if this might be the last time I'd ever see it.
You know,
Felix said,
in all this excitement I forgot to leave a coin inside the tomb.
My face must have betrayed the fact I had no idea what he's talking about because he went on with an explanation.
It's an old custom to show how far the last expedition on a dig site went,
he said, pulling a coin from his pocket and handing it to me.
If you're done packing up, why don't you go in and leave this in the tomb? I know I'd want a last look inside before leaving.
Sure thing, I said, taking the coin from him.
Just don't take too long. We still have time, but I don't want us stumbling through the dark on our hike out of here.
I felt small in the corridor to the chapel. Nothing remained in the chambers except a tripod and a few flickering work lights. I gave the serdab a wide berth, making a cursory inspection of the storeroom and an empty chamber. They were in much the same state, inhabited only by work lights, illuminating the emptiness within. I couldn't help grimacing at the ancient remnants of the blood at the altar in the empty chamber. I was still looking at the brown and black stains when I heard the slow approach of footsteps coming up the corridor.
It's a real shame, isn't it?
Sam sighed behind me.
When you found this tomb, I thought I'd spend every waking moment inside, making discoveries, translating hieroglyphs, and things I've always dreamed of. Who knew I'd be forced to play secretary this whole time?
Maybe after the storm blows over, they'll bring us back. I mean, we did just find the burial chamber.
Perhaps.
Sam became thoughtful for a moment.
It's quite hard to say, really.
We lingered in the chapel, the occasional whine of wind interrupting our silence. Sam turned and walked to the center of the chapel and peered into the depths of the shaft. I glanced mistrustfully at the serdab before joining her.
The worst thing is that Pratt James is the only one who got into the mummy pit.
Gazing down the dark shaft, I thought of how rare the opportunity was, getting to see a mummy undisturbed in its final resting place. I remembered my excitement as a child seeing a mummy for the first time in a museum, wrapped in linen behind thick panes of glass. It was a pivotal moment in my life, and I'd be lying to myself if I said I wasn't chasing the same excitement ever since. Was I really going to let a sandstorm stand in my way? Why don't we go down and have a look for ourselves, I said, shooting Sam a sly grin. Her expression might have been one of shock, but there was excitement behind it.
Are you mad? There's a sandstorm closing in on us, and you want to go deeper into the tomb?
Just for a quick look. It won't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. Besides, Felix did tell me to leave this coin to mark our progress, I said, holding out the new euro coin. Why not leave it at the deepest point? Sam bit her lower lip as she pulled a coin of her own from her pocket and looked at the tripod. She was definitely tempted, but still she hesitated.
We could get in serious trouble for something like this. Besides, I can't exactly climb with a hand like this, can I?
She said, raising her injured hand. I could lower you down. Besides, what's James going to do? Send us home? Sam shimmied into a climbing harness, and I tightened it around her waist and legs. I took up the rope slack as she rested her weight onto the rigging under the tripod. She looked nervous, but still flashed me one of her 2 big smiles as I lowered her into the pit. Paying out rope, I realized I didn't know how deep the shaft went. Focused as I was at the task at hand, I couldn't help but glance at the Ka statue, peering at me through the serdab. I tried to ignore it, all the while feeling like I was failing to meet a predator's gaze. The mosaic on the opposite wall wasn't any more comforting. The once peaceful hunting scene now seemed sinister. I'd never noticed the bloodstains guiding the hunters through the wheat and papyrus along banks of the Nile. Looking at the boats submerged beneath the river, it struck me how primitive it was compared to the reed boats gliding on the surface. It looked like it was woven together out of vines and twigs, leaving gaps so big it was no wonder that it sank. Someone must have cleaned the mosaic since the last I saw, because now the gaunt woman inside had dark red splotches on her hands, her cloak, and most concerningly around her mouth. The rope went slack in my hands, snapping me back to reality. Sam tugged the rope twice, signaling me she had unclasped herself, and I pulled the carabiner end of the rope back up. I paid attention this time and estimated about 40 feet between the chapel and the bottom of the pit. Adrenaline pulsed through my body as I dangled my feet over the edge and clasped the carabiner to my harness's belaying loop. Sam was right about the trouble we'd be in if anyone caught us, but in that moment, the excitement was worth it. Lowering myself into the pit, I couldn't identify the strange scent. It reminded me vaguely of the resins from the storeroom. It had been faint in the chapel after removing the tile, but now it was almost nauseating. Descending deeper into the cold shaft, the stonemason's chisels lost their precision from the chambers above. Square joints and smooth finishes gave way to sloppy corners and pockmarked walls. The final stretch looked more like a crudely enlarged cave than anything man-made. Emerging into the large chamber below lent credibility to this cave theory. Coarse natural walls stretched beyond the reach of my headlamp, interrupted here and there by stone columns and fallen rocks. I glanced around and unbuckled my climbing harness. Staring at the end of a rough aisle, hewn from the cave floor, I felt sudden discomfort as my light played over a black rectangular box, resting at the far end of the chamber.
"Come on," Sam whispered,
already heading down the aisle.
"Let's have a look at that mummy."
We crept silently toward the black sarcophagus. It rested on a low altar, about a foot from the rough floor. We placed Felix's new €1 coin and Sam's salve, as she called it, at the base of the altar. I wanted to leave behind a new American coin, but hadn't planned for this. I had to settle for leaving a quarter from 1985 I found in my pocket. Our task finished, we stood there in silent awe. There was no death mask, no rich painted colors, not even the barest attempt to shape the sarcophagus like a human. It was a simple black onyx box, more or less rectangular in shape with slightly rounded corners. The cover was flat with beveled edges. Despite its simplicity, it had a striking appearance. One thing that disturbed me was how clean it was. Everything in the rest of the tomb, even things we'd cleaned half a dozen times, still had a residual layer of dust. Equipment in camp seemed to attract and collect sand, even the supposedly airtight interiors of pelican cases. But the mirror-like black stone in front of us didn't show even the slightest trace of dust. Its finish was so smooth I couldn't find a seam for the lid until Sam got closer and pointed out fresh shards of bitumen cement scraped from a narrow crevice wrapping around it.
"More of James's handiwork, no doubt,"
Sam said with a huff.
"When we get back to Cairo, I'm reporting that bastard to the Ministry of Antiquities. It's as if he's determined to ruin this site."
"Think he did that too?" I asked, gesturing at an inscription on the top of the lid. The unevenness of the lines and the shaky look of the characters lent it the air of something improvised. It was certainly out of place on the neatly crafted sarcophagus. Sam's brow furrowed.
"No, I don't think he could have done that with a penknife. This onyx is hard stuff."
"You know hieroglyphs," I said, nudging her. "What's it say?"
"I wish I could tell you, but I can't read it."
Sam frowned. "Why not?"
"Because those aren't hieroglyphs, Derrick. They aren't Demotic or hieratic. They aren't even Egyptian. They look more like cuneiform."
"What the hell's that doing here? Ancient Egyptians barely had a presence in this valley, let alone the Babylonians."
"Your guess is as good as mine."
Wind whistled through the tomb, but the approaching sandstorm was all but forgotten as we pondered the out-of-place writing. I couldn't believe James kept this to himself. It was the single most intriguing find the expedition uncovered. I was also frustrated that there was no time to investigate. I had no idea when another expedition would visit the valley, but in all likelihood, neither myself or Sam would be part of it.
I have a friend back at uni who studies Mesopotamian languages. Maybe she can help us,
Sam said, pulling out a digital camera.
If nothing else, we simply must document this. The last thing we want is anyone thinking this tomb was vandalized before another expedition returns to the site.
The notion of a vandal familiar with cuneiform stumbling on the site was absurd to me, but Sam said nothing. She snapped several pictures, adjusting the flash and other settings of her camera. Scanning the vast cave, I felt the odd sensation we weren't alone. It was ridiculous, I know, but we hadn't thoroughly examined the chamber, and it was easy to imagine something lurking in the shadows. Sam cursed, and I turned to see her frowning at the camera screen. No matter how she adjusted the shutter speed or what angle she tried, her images were either too blurred or riddled with starbursts to read. Sam groaned.
Why didn't that prat James bring any work lights down here? It'd make this so much easier.
Who knows, I shrugged, pulling my field notebook from my pocket. Hurrying past the words I'd written on the inside cover, I found a blank page.
We don't have time to transcribe all this,
Sam protested. One page was large enough to cover the inscription. The symbols left behind a white relief against a growing background of graphite as I rubbed the side of my pencil over the page. Sam flashed her too big smile and snapped a picture of the rubbing.
Derrick, that's brilliant. I'll email Jennifer as soon as we get out of here.
Wailing winds outside reminded us of our situation. Muffled as it was after passing through the tomb, it remained a harrowing reminder of what was heading our way.
Come on, let's get back to camp,
Sam said, glancing uneasily to the light flickering down the shaft.
The last thing we want is to get left behind down here.
I nodded and followed her back to the shaft. Walking down the aisle, the sensation of being watched by an unseen presence morphed into one of being followed. I succumbed to the urge and gave the sarcophagus a parting glance. My headlamp trembled as the black box grew smaller in the cone of light. We were almost back to the shaft when Sam jerked to the stop and let out a muffled gasp. She turned to face me, surprise on her face. A chill ran down my spine as I looked past her to the column of light and found the carabiner end of the rope was gone. The working end of the rope was uncoiling itself, slithering up the hole. Labored breathing echoed from within. Someone was coming down, and we were suddenly afraid of who it might be. Instinctively, we snapped off our headlamps and hid behind one of the chamber's stone columns. The grunts grew louder, and the pile of rope shrank as whoever it was got closer. My heart sank in my stomach when James descended into the mummy pit. Even from a distance, I was repulsed by the noticeable changes in the already unlikable man. His movements were jittery, insect-like, as if he was very excited or trying not to panic. I expected him to turn on a light, but after unclasping himself, he straightened up and approached the sarcophagus with the graceful silence of an acolyte. I saw the dim outline of a haversack and a scroll before he vanished into the darkness.
What in the bloody hell is he doing down here?
Sam whispered as soon as he was out of earshot. It looks like he's setting up another ritual.
Has he gone mad? What about the sandstorm?
A match flared up at the far end of the chamber, and a flickering oil lamp illuminated the strange man as he unrolled the scroll from the night before. White smoke rolled lazily from a bowl of incense, and James knelt before the black box. I waited until he began to chant before whispering in Sam's ear, "Now's our chance." We didn't need our headlamps. We crept toward the shaft, guided only by the light from the chapel. We hadn't made a sound stepping into the light, but I had to force myself to pull my eyes from James and fasten the rope to Sam's harness. My hands trembled over the carabiner as I struggled to clasp it. Turning my back to James made the chanting even more frightening. Icy coldness washed over me as the dead language echoed through the mummy pit for the first time in thousands of years. I had to tell myself I was only imagining the faint sound like whispers joining in as James spoke the incantation. I snapped the barrel shut on Sam's carabiner and stood to face her. The color had drained from her face, and terror filled her eyes as she stared over my shoulder towards James. He hadn't moved. He was still kneeling before the sarcophagus. Whatever he was chanting seemed to hold more significance to Sam than it did for me.
"We need to get out of here. Now,"
Sam said, trembling. I took up the slack in the rope and began hoisting Sam up the shaft.
"I'll pull you once I get to the top," Sam whispered,
before disappearing into the hole. Pulling someone up is a lot harder than controlling their descent. It took all my strength, and once again I couldn't keep watch over James. His distant chants were the only reassurance I had he wasn't making his way towards me. The climbing rope morphed as I pulled it, and the 40 feet I'd estimated earlier seemed an impossible distance as the rope slowly coiled beneath me. At some point I noticed something off in the chamber. It hadn't gone silent. The wail from the approaching storm was hard to ignore, but it shouldn't have been loud enough to drown out James's ritual. To my horror, I realized his echo and chants were no longer audible. Focused as I was on pulling the rope, I had to know why he'd stopped. Straining my neck around, I glanced at the far end of the chamber. The oil lamp illuminated the sarcophagus, along with a scroll and a winding cloud of incense, but there was no sign of James. I panicked. I pulled the rope as fast as I could, grabbing longer and longer lengths. Looking up, I was greeted by falling dust and sand. I was relieved when the load on the rope finally lightened before vanishing entirely. Sam was out. Looking up the shaft once more, I saw her peering down, struggling to unclasp the carabiner with her bandaged hand. I crept away from the shaft's dim light while I waited. Shrouded in darkness as I was, I couldn't help but feeling exposed.
"I know you're down here, Derrick."
James's voice echoed around me, accompanied by the same chorus of whispers from earlier, and the familiar metallic chime of someone flipping a coin. I scanned the chamber, but saw no sign of him. The patter of footsteps, drawing closer, echoed over the approaching storm.
"Shouldn't you be evacuating with the others?"
he taunted. I was several yards from the shaft when the silvery carabiner bobbed into view in the dusty air. Seeing the promise of escape so close emboldened me. "I could ask you the same thing," I shouted, and James let out a low chuckle. I'd never heard anything like a laugh from him, and I didn't like it.
"I'm not leaving this place,"
he said, matter-of-factly. His words echoed, assaulting me from all around. "Not when I've finally found her." The carabiner bobbed closer, almost low enough I could jump for it. "I don't know what you're planning on doing with this mummy, but as soon as word gets out about this, you're finished. You'll never work on a dig site again." I saw my chance and ran into the pillar of light. I grabbed the carabiner with trembling hands and tried to snap it over my harness. My loss of dexterity was worsened by the need to scan the room for James instead of focusing on the rope. Standing in the center of the light made my surroundings that much darker. All I could tell for sure was that James's footsteps were getting closer. Finally, the carabiner gate snapped shut around my harness, and I closed the barrel. I was about to signal for Sam to pull me up when I saw James's outline just beyond the reach of the faltering light.
"Do you really think I care about this position I've endured for the last 20 years?
He said with a sneer. His eyes glinted at me in the darkness, unsettling me in ways I can't explain. He reminded me of a shark gazing at people through aquarium glass with shiny dead eyes. Only now there was no glass. "I have searched for the priestess all these years, and now I've finally found her. Now I'm so close to setting her free." He chuckled disturbingly. "You'll see. You'll all see." I was chilled to the bone and desperately tugged the rope twice before fumbling to the other end.
"You should stay down here with us, Derrick," he said,
opening his hand as if offering me something just beyond the reach of the light. I felt sick when he grinned at me with sharp gray teeth.
"Otherwise, you're just going to die like all the others."
Sam's efforts from above and my own pulling lifted me from the floor. I didn't dare take my eyes off James until I was out of his reach. All that time, he never came any closer. He just stared at me from the darkness. I pulled myself up hand over hand. I could barely hear over the wind howling through the confines of the shaft. Around halfway up, I heard the echo of James resuming his ritual, interspersed with grinding stone. My lungs burned, but I couldn't stop to listen. I felt the sensation of a presence following me up the shaft. Unwanted images of something pulling me down by my ankles played in my mind. Cold blood pulsed through my veins when Sam screamed in the next chamber.
Faster, Derrick! Hurry!
I caught hold of the edge of the floor above and abandoned the rope. Sam looked at me with fear in her eyes. She grabbed my harness and helped me over the top. She crouched beside me, pulling me away from the shaft with trembling hands. She screamed something, but as I clawed backwards, away from the pit, her words came to me, as if I were underwater. That's when I saw the silhouetted form of a humanoid cloud of black dust contorting its way painfully through the Serdab's small opening. Sharp, inhumanly long limbs flailed. Its mouth gaped and writhed, its howls of agony echoing in time with the storm outside. We kicked back away from the thing as it plopped free of the Serdab and dragged itself across the floor. Its limbs bent where they shouldn't have, sounding like broken bones. It wailed with every move it made. Sam helped me to my feet as the thing plunged into the shaft, and we ran from that place. I didn't care what happened to James or what he did with the mummy at this point. All we wanted was to get out of there. Mosaics glared at us in the flickering work lights. The Ka statue glowered at us from inside the Serdab, eyes red and long fangs bared. Our boots thudded down the corridor, and near the bottom, sand poured through the entrance into the antechamber. Thunder rumbled over our heads as we burst from the tomb into the stone stairway. The plywood retaining walls bulged inward, seeping sand and small rocks from their seams. Each gust of wind seemed to cause them to bend more, and I feared collapse. We trudged up the stairs as the sand swallowed them once more. Windborne sand clawed at our skin as we emerged from the tomb entrance. The inside of my mouth tasted like mud, even using my shirt as a makeshift mask. It made breathing bearable, but I could barely see where we were going through the sand in my eyes. Lightning spiderwebbed across the sky, prodding us to run toward the faint glow of camp that much faster. Looking behind us, I saw the terrifying column of sand towering over the valley. It wasn't possible. There's no way something like that had just cropped up in the short time we'd been in the tomb. But that didn't change the fact that it was now within sight, ready to bear down on us. I thought of the miles separating us from the lifts and the excavation site, and I realized for the first time, this might be a storm we weren't going to escape.